So what was the driving force in poverty? Now, you're probably sensing it already. It's all about survival. And folks who are living in poverty engage in the behaviors they engage in not out of a sense of survival. Remember when we defined culture earlier, we said it's a congruent set of values, practices, attitudes, and beliefs that shape our way of surviving. Now, in poverty, that's shaped by survival. Two things that are very important. As we look at these dimensions of culture, bear in mind that we're not talking in absolutes. They're in gradients. And so there are no absolutes here. There's no absolutes in life. Now, this simply provides a framework for understanding class distinction. And the second caution, and perhaps an even greater one, is that no one class is better or worse than another. They simply are. And people live and work within a class based on their lived experience. And so we don't want to promote the concept that it's important to move everybody in poverty to middle class, or to move everybody from middle class to wealth. No, that's not what we're advocating here. We're simply advocating a better understanding of people's life experience and how class does in fact influence behavior. So we talked about that driving force. How does that play out in people's lives? Let's take a simple issue like food. Now, because in healthcare, this has some very serious implications. If I'm in poverty and I'm in survival mode and I'm making that trip to the grocery store, a key question that's going to be on the back of my mind, whether it's conscious or preconscious, is the food I purchase going to be enough? So the driving force as I make grocery selections is going to be around quantity. Is it enough? In middle class, certainly without surprise, the question related to my food purchases are going to relate to quality. How healthy is this food? Now, will it enable me to achieve my goals around personal appearance and around health and fitness? And even though these may not be consciously at play, they certainly are subconsciously at play. And so the whole issue around food selection is based on quality. And what about wealth? Well, you've probably all had that uncomfortable experience of going to a grand restaurant for a special occasion and being a bit horrified by the menu, and even more horrified when you receive your dinner and it is presented in a very spectacular manner, but in a portion size that may leave you hungry. That's because in wealth, the experience of eating is part and parcel of maintaining those social connections. And so quality is not an issue. You already are able to afford the best quality there is. The issue is all about presentation. Is it going to impress the others that are dining with me this evening? Now, where that has some severe implications is sometimes we have a tendency to criticize people in poverty for the choices they make. We know that obesity is a national problem. Now, in poverty, sometimes we make the leap to say people are making poor food choices. The food choices, in fact, tend to be appropriate based on my mindset, which is one of survival. I recently had a conversation with a young mother who's really trying to change, a young mother who's lived in generational poverty, who's trying to change her nutrition habits. Now, she's got some information, but the longest journey in the world is about 12 inches, and that's the journey from the heart to the head. She intellectually knows what's good nutrition, but in her heart, she wants her children to be happy. And she shared that in a recent trip to the grocery store, and it was in the winter months, fresh apples were $1.79 a pound. Now, the snack cakes that were loaded with sugar were on sale. Buy one package and get one free, and there were 12 cakes in each package. With the money she had available, she knew she could buy 3 or 4 apples or 2 packages of snack cakes. And she bought the snack cakes and then was very uncomfortable with that decision. So when we're working with folks in poverty and we're trying to change behaviors, we need to be gentle about that and bear in mind how the mindset from my class status influences my decision making. Now, let's take a look at money in much the same way. Now, if I am living in middle class because I'm focusing on achievement, what's going to be important to me is management. And so I view money as something that needs to be managed. And I'm going to budget. And budgeting is a future-oriented tool. I'm going to budget a certain amount for my basic expenses. Now, I may budget something for gifts. I will probably make an active decision to save some money. I'll make an active decision to put something away for my future, particularly in retirement funds. So money is something to be managed. Now, in poverty, however, because we're in survival mode, money is something to be used or to be spent. Now, at Catholic Charities, I have many volunteers that work with folks in poverty, and we often find cultural clashes. Now, one point of the year where we see them frequently is during income tax time. Now, our volunteers will help people look at earned income credits and make sure they get the best possible tax return. And it could potentially be a check for several $1,000s. Because living in generational poverty forces me in survival mode, and I see money as something to be spent, I may get that check and go out and buy a widescreen television or make a deposit on a car that I can't afford, or have a social gathering with my friends. And volunteers are sometimes horrified. Well, what were they thinking of? They were thinking about their own survival. And there's a resource here now, and I'm going to use it before it goes away. Very different from the middle class perspective of money being something to be managed to achieve future goals. I mentioned budgeting in middle class a minute ago. It's a concept that's almost impossible to grasp for someone who's lived in generational poverty. Now, if we look at the concept of time across the classes, now people living in middle class tend to very much have a future orientation. Not because they're always moving towards some specific goal, some specific end. Even in social services, everything now is defined by outcomes. What do we want to happen and how are we going to get there? That's a very middle-class mindset that's future-oriented and geared towards achievement. Persons in generational poverty have a different time reference. It's about the present. That's the only thing that counts. It's the only thing I feel I have some sense of control over. I don't know what's going to happen a week from now or 2 weeks from now.